Manchester.
At Manchester, and he's currently writing a book. What's the book about?
Spiritual revolution.
So he's very much into the spiritual matters, and what he wants to talk to us today is about monotheism and polytheism.
Monotheism and polytheism. No atheism.
No, polytheism. Anyway, one and multiple religions in ancient Egypt. So can we welcome August? Thank you.
Hello. Right, the marriage of polytheism and monotheism. The ancient Egyptians never reached monotheism in its most proper sense. They could not give the one God the same share of admiration they received in the so-called monotheist religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They got very close, but ultimately the polytheistic nature of their religion and thought was too deeply ingrained. The other gods would need worship and love, and any god being a kind of monotheist god would find its possibility and effectiveness resting on its interrelation with these other gods. Perhaps Akhenaten got the closest to true monotheism, but even Atonism was undone by the polytheistic nature of the materials used. For example, the sun, which could be worshipped as part of a system of monotheism. Sorry, I shouldn't look up. It's too difficult. Perhaps Akhenaten got the closest to true monotheism, but even Atonism was undone by the polytheistic nature of the materials used. For example, the sun, which could be worshipped as a part of the system of polytheism quite adequately, yet proved unable to sufficiently bear the spiritual meaning of the one God. Amun, another proto-monotheistic god, would always appear as too specific, a person with a funny hat on, too limited in himself to tolerate no idols, needing the charm of Isis, appearing resplendent to cause the dead to rise, or needing the vitality of Horus to renew the world. Basically, Egyptian religion could not manage to escape its polytheistic heritage. Any attempts at formulating the essence of this one God was limited by materials garnered from the polytheistic tradition, which could not quite make the evolution required. Ancient Egyptian religion, by and large, accepted the notion of a God for all things, who existed in the beginning, alone, responsible for all creation, from which all things come, who is in everything. Basically, that there is one God for all things. But where they would disagree with the monotheist proper is in the degree to which this being is good, powerful, and worthy of admiration and respect. That is, in the status and position given to this being. For example, they could think that there are other beings or gods which are greater and more worthy of admiration than this universal God, as is arguably the case in the early part of the ancient Egyptian history, and evident in the pyramid text, which we will look at soon. Or they could think that this one God is the greatest being, yet must still rely on other divinities for it to function properly, much more so than with the monotheist, even the one who allows for angels and other divine entities, and this may be the case in much of the priestly and royal circles of the New Kingdom. A universal God could be positioned in various ways and given differing amounts of power and worth. The ancient Egyptian religion consistently gave less worth to the one God than the monotheist proper, for reasons both of not having the means to picture such great worth for the one God, as well as lacking the desire to do so. So let us look at how a kind of universal God was integrated with the polytheistic belief system. To do this, it will first be necessary to discover what kind of thing a universal God, or a specific polytheistic God, is. By knowing what these things are, we should be in a better position to know how they can be integrated. So firstly, the universal God. The essence of a universal God is any essence which can be said to have a divine character. It's lost. The essence of a universal God is any essence which can be said to have a divine character which can be said to be in all things. This is anything which satisfies the requirements of being divine and being in all things. So as an example, we can say that peace is something kind of divine which could also be in all things, because the being of all things would have nothing to be in strife with or against, as it's like alone, and would therefore be at peace. The fact that peace is not exactly a full description of the one God is not much of a problem, as each essence we state for this being, this one being, can always be said to be inadequate. The truth is, the one God expresses itself in these partial essences, and beyond these there will always be greater and more universal descriptions of these gods. Okay, so I've got a collection of monotheistic images. And they're just all quite, I'll go for it. In all of these photos we can see certain characteristics which belong especially to monotheism. Well, actually there's kind of two types of monotheism here. The Amana style and the more general monotheistic attitude, which can seem to be pervasive a few hundred years on either side of the Atonist revolution, probably centred on the god Amun. Nevertheless, both of these types have common characteristics. There was much cross-fertilization between the two. In these examples, we can see a concern for stillness, calmness, and tranquility, a kind of meditative and focused energy, simplicity, and a kind of generality, not distracted by any specific differentiation. So a good example would be like that face. It's kind of like, she has a simple face. And admittedly, this soft and gentle simplicity refers more to the Amun style, but it's also evident in the Amarna style, as we can see in this middle photo. So that's Akhenaten with the hat on, blue hat. Yeah, he's kind of, he still has that kind of Akhenaten like strength and simplicity, but it's kind of a bit more calm down, gentle, in a moon way, I suppose. One can see how a universal God spread out across the entire universe without anything to differentiate itself against would be simple, calm, pure, gentle, and all-embracing. In monotheism, there is an all-pervading and simple presence, which is kind of gentle, yet also forceful in the way that it influences all other beings. Along with this softer and perhaps more spiritual interpretation of universality, there comes also a more severe, lawful, and ordered interpretation. And again, it is quite easy to understand why universality creates law and order. For one rule can apply to a multiplicity of situations or people. You can see this approach more clearly in the Amarna style. For example, if you look at the bust of Akhenaten, it says, "I am pure, I am focused." The narrow gaze of the eyes and the exaggerated straight lines of the face say, "I have simple and pure thought, which can spread out amongst the whole world like the radiance of the sun at dawn, filling the land and sky with its uniform light." Monotheism and universality are crucial in bringing order, control, focus, and stability to the world. So here we have a hybrid sculpture containing both the Amarna and the Amun styles. We can see its solid simplicity, like this simple face, rounded, soft, gentle. So here, its solid simplicity, we can see its solid simplicity, which is also made gentle by a need for generality and the embrace of diverse things. Here we can see the power and goodness of the one God. Note the kind of blankness and inexpressiveness of the face, or if you're being more positive, its serene and meditative nature. Blandness and inexpressiveness is exactly what you do not get in these polytheistic faces. Polytheism is interested in particular expressions or essences. It is interested in those great powers which are full of specific meaning and goodness. Polytheism is more apt at expressing things in the power of their difference. It does not reduce them to a uniform blandness. Therefore, it can better express goodness, love, life, divinity, vigour, beauty, truth, our hopes and dreams, the hopes and dreams of society. Basically, it can express better the innumerable and particular powers and forces we deem divine or good or important. In these pictures, we can see that the people look enraptured and transfixed by some great presence. Their bodies and their faces outpour with an expressive energy which speaks of their love for what they deem virtuous and good. And this expression is like a question mark, without completion or resolution, like the call of a lost bird. I mean, you can see like maybe bottom right, they're all like looking up at like some great thing. Okay, so we've got special one. This lady looks out in a manner that suggests she's enraptured by and in awe of some great and wonderful power. Her whole body and her face suggests, desires, and reaches out to some divine and life-enhancing essence. This power is not one of the universal and solemn simplicity, but rather one which is abundant with expressive force and goodness. Because her inspiration is particular, it can be all the more intense, stimulating, full, and virtuous. We can see this in the way she looks up with wide and awestruck eyes, showing how open and receptive she is to a power which appears as so strange and so great, rather than the closed and restricted look we see in monotheistic faces. The whole statue tries to offer as much expression, goodness, and love as it can muster, not existing in the guarded world of monotheism, but reaching out bravely to ask its divine question. Polytheism allows one to be open to essences or forces with greater expressiveness, with a greater depth and power of goodness, as well as essences which are more wonderful and more transforming. This is the case simply because polytheism focuses on whatever is deemed remarkable and good, and it allows this remarkable goodness to express itself in its full being, rather than watering it down to the level of a simple universal. However, we can also see from this photo that she is not just some wild primitive enthralled to a multiplicity of uncontrollable passions and unable to grasp the bigger, more universal picture, which is an adequate criticism of polytheism, which shows that it still needs the help of certain monotheistic tendencies. So if you look at a dress with its neat and ordered geometric patterns, her refined and elegant body, imbued with a civilized and measured repose, even her face is kind of pure, simple, kindly, and all-embracing. She looks like she would happily pay her respects to the gods of universal love and order, such as Ra and Atum. The universal cosmic harmony of Ma'at would find an advocate in her, but what she would not do is bow down to them completely, or put them above her glorious visions of greatness, which overflow with unparalleled divinity and love. This woman illustrates quite nicely how in ancient Egypt there was a harmonious cooperation between polytheism and monotheism. There was a universal care and concern, an appreciation of a universal divinity, along with the stability, order, and clarity that brings. But this was not raised above the gods or any specific expression full of virtue. Rather, it was seen as something which was not only good in itself, but also helped further the higher goal of reaching particular states. However, it could be argued that polytheism being the dominant partner in the relationship was a rarity from the start of the Old Kingdom up until Christianity. Especially in the New Kingdom, one can imagine the Egyptian elites siding with the universal God. After the New Kingdom, with the 30 to establish a properly monotheistic creed, it seems that a lot of the monotheistic enthusiasm ebbed away. So it's in the Middle Kingdom and the Old Kingdom, and everything before that, where we are likely to see polytheism leading monotheism. The birth of a monotheistic or proto-monotheistic creed or system seemed to occur in Heliopolis around the 5th dynasty. Therefore, the pyramid text for the last 5th dynasty pharaoh, Unas, gives us a pretty good picture of religious thought at this crucial period. It's hard to overstate just how important the pyramid texts are in showing the birth of a monotheistic and systematic approach to the world. We have the notion of a simple presence which can lead us through all the creations and destructions of life and death, something solid and reliable which will always remain and always be present, a mediator and safe haven in conflict, and that which ensures that conflict and duality, represented most frequently by Horus and Set, or Seth as it was said, do not cancel each other out or find themselves in an endless repetitive cycle which moves nowhere, but rather that conflict and duality serves to ever proceed along and glorify a universal standard. In this way, it shows the incorporation of a linear time, that is a universal and fixed standard of time, into a cyclical or event-based time. The pyramid texts show the appeal to a universal being which can guide us through all the chaos of difference and change. So here we have one example. O Ra, Unas has bitten the Unas has bitten the father of he who bit him. This is the being who has bitten Unas. Unas did not bite him. So instead of like the tit for tat kind of conflict of Horus and Set or whatever, he's kind of going above that and kind of going to the father. So there's a kind of unified progression upwards rather than just fighting. This shows that instead of a tit for tat conflict, there is a unified progression towards higher states of being. This is clarified as the claw of Atum upon the dorsal vertebrate of the serpent, which stop the strife. Fall, glide away. You are washed, O desert. Let there be water. There is no dust. That's just kind of the purity of the one that's conquered everything. An all-pervading stable power and arbiter is really a quite useful thing to have. We can also see how this can lead to a systematic and in some way mechanical interpretation of the world. For a few limited and universal principles are established which are fitted together to construct a kind of system and mechanism which will allow for a steady advancement of both the human and divine nature, as well as providing a stable model for comprehension of the world. So for example, in the theology of Ra's journey, life and death, those irrevocably complex, mysterious and various phenomena are reduced to the universal simplicity of the sun's presence and absence. It really is heavily analogous to the use of zeros and ones in computing, or the simplicity of correctness and falsity in mathematics. Yet throughout the pyramid text, one still gets the impression that the author's ultimate allegiance remains with the gods of polytheism. We can see this in the role and value given to polytheistic gods and notions throughout. We can also get an idea of the status of the universal gods by looking at their role and function in relation to other gods and the pharaoh. We can see that there is something practical and utilitarian about the universal gods, that they are in many ways like a tool, like the aforementioned claw of Atum, or the ground and place on which things are established, or that which gives a reliable source of essential life-giving nutrients. So here's a 3 quotes. O Ennead, a new Horus is in the sunlight, so it's like in, it's kind of a place rather than a kind of divine thing, stability and utilitarian. And so again, as he sits on the seat of the Lord of all, Unas takes heaven, he splits its brass, Unas is led on the ways of the becoming one. And finally, O great God, whose name is unknown, bring at once a meal of the unique Lord. O Lord of the horizon, make place for Unas. So again, it's food, place, stability, like something more utilitarian than a divine being as such, even though it is a divine being. But it still has that more utilitarian function. So it seems the monotheistic gods are reliable and stable sources of continued life and continued advancement, giving the stability and order needed to make one's way through life and death, as well as giving that empathetic and expanded consciousness which gives harmony, peace, and a gentle kind of love. But all this was not supreme over the gods of polytheism. Rather, the stability, order, and the expanded consciousness, and whatever else monotheism is, was utilised for polytheistic ends. So I mean, this is just a nice little example of Heliopolis and whatever was going on at that period in terms of that energy, which started there, I suppose. From the pyramid texts and the priesthood of Heliopolis came a theology, ideology, and worldview, which would in time master the entire world and its people. In what world do you think we live today, my brothers and sisters? We live in the dry and empty husk of monotheism. The highest and most powerful ideas and commands today are simple, inexpressive, lawful, and tepid universals. So for example, human rights, which sounds like a good thing, it is a good thing, but it's a universal stuff. The creation of undifferentiated liberal identity, but liberal. The sacrifice of life and thought to the laws of the market, rationalism, and so on, spread throughout the world and now approaching finality in the form of globalization. My sisters and brothers, a great conflict comes. Creativity, spirit, life, radiance, divinity, passion, goodness, energy, culture, love, belief, colour. An abundant and beautiful garden of new worlds, new values and new gods shall be reborn. And then, finally, but do not fear the chaos. If we look at this nice scribe, we can see that he seems sturdy and reliable, but still, one can see through his thoughtful and uplifted countenance that he desires something more, something greater, and more abundant of goodness than any universal notion. That's it.
Thank you very much. I must admit, I've never really considered the way statues are looking, or what they might be looking at. I've not really considered.
Well, it's like the Akhenaten revolution or whatever. I suppose like the art was quite crucial to it, and the creation of a kind of like androgyny is a good example, I suppose, because that's like finding the unified ground between man and woman. So like obviously androgyny is a kind of obvious trait of Akhenaten art or Amarna art. Yeah, so it's like finding the universal element, and I mean, and like then with the face, it's like when they have a sort of like kind of like their eyes are, because a trope of like polytheistic art is eyes wide open, and a trope of monotheistic art, at least in Egypt, is eyes closed, not closed, but narrowed.
Yes, it's like the Akhenatens.
Yeah, so it's a more like kind of focused, like restricted, whereas, and in some way more embracive, because I mean, by cutting out some things you can expand in other ways. But yeah, so the kind of trope of polytheistic faces is that kind of like foi, like something before you, like it's kind of like magical and you're like in awe of it. And it's like a kind of like openness to experience.
I think it goes to show as well that there's just so much you can read into and can be read from art. It's never as simple as it looks. Are there any questions?
But what about the context of the art? I mean, there's some statues there that are meant to be in temples. They're in a different context to those pieces of art which are the personal effects of somebody, as in the items in the tomb of Tutankhamun. You've actually got to put that in. And is this just a scribe, right, to epitomise the scribes, right, which is the top level that a common person can actually get to? So it's kind of.
Well, I think in general, I mean, you can see so many like commonalities. I mean, as soon as like the Amarna period comes, not even the Amarna period, like the Amun period, or like the start of the New Kingdom or something. It's just like looking for a book of all the history of pictures of ancient Egypt. I mean, you can clearly see like a progression, and it just so say about the start of the New Kingdom or something. It's like faces get more simple, more focused, more narrowed, more like it's just more about a different type of energy. It's more about a kind of simple, still, universal, calm energy. And I mean, this is it's kind of like a world phenomenon. It's like Buddhism and Taoism, whatever. Like there comes a point in human history where, in a lot of cases, there is a progression towards monotheism. But yeah, you can see it. And in the earlier periods, I mean, you can just quite clearly see like just the eyes and the kind of, and like even with like the bodies, and especially with that woman, it's kind of more like it's more like making a statement. It's just like, it doesn't really care to kind of represent this kind of universal stillness. It just says, this is what I am, like, isn't it nice? So it's like, there's a clear difference, I think, between like what you see in the Armani.
The quality of the artist.
No, but I mean, but if there's historically, if like, you're just seeing one type of art in this historical period and then it suddenly changes, I mean, I think you can generalise.
It doesn't change that quickly.
I know, but I mean, like you see Armani and around Armani period, it's just something different, it's something quite different.
I think you two guys need to have a discussion about this later on. I can see it's going to get quite complicated. But
yeah, but like New Kingdom is different. Is there any more questions?
We'll have some time for questions at the end as
Okay.
well. So thank you very much.